Hello, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Set Lusting Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. I say this with my tongue in cheek, but there is a little serious. When Arlen Schumer is on me, I don't get many words in.
That-
So,
Is that any way to start our interview?
Arlen, I got to get it in now because once I start
That's what
asking you
she said.
questions,
That's what he
hey,
said.
so we were just in here talking. You and I are within 1 year of each other, and you were saying something, and there is a good chance I have done thousands of these episodes.
Right.
And if you grew up in the Northeast, there is a good chance you discovered Bruce in summer camp. You
No.
either it no, I know you didn't, but
Oh.
hearing people talk about it.
But hold on a second. Just to let
Yeah.
you know, my summer camp experiences are where I discovered comics and superheroes earlier than Bruce. But
Yeah.
but believe me, I have significant summer camp experiences. But it was in the summer I discovered Bruce, just not at camp. I
Yeah.
was 17. Camp was my
Yeah.
childhood.
And I'm gonna have you tell that story, and I love that story. But Arlen and I, he's been on the podcast a couple of times. I started doing other stuff. He continues to be amazing what he does. And we caught each other across the aisle at the 50th anniversary of Born to Run educational seminar, and we saw each other and big old bear hugs. We took pictures, and Arlen's, man, I got to get back. And I said, yes.
See, I
So
only think I've been on you once before. I don't think I've been on you more than once. I think
you're
only
probably
once.
right. Yeah. Okay.
You could have me on more
I
often.
should have you on more often. I absolutely should. But you were saying before we hit record, like you didn't have a cousin, you didn't have anyone teaching you Bruce. And that's what made me think
Somebody
of,
older to take
yeah,
me down to the Jersey Shore. I
yeah,
couldn't drive. I was too young. So I missed those early Bruce years,
yeah,
even though I would, but North Jersey versus the shore are like two different countries.
yeah. We're going to talk to Bruce, but in a minute, I'm looking at your wonderful background. And I do another podcast where two friends of mine, Lou and Karen, we take turns picking items. And I had them watch the Bill and I documentary
Ah,
about Bill Finger.
my 15 seconds of fame.
Yes, you did. And I saw you on there, and I was like, but they were amazed that this even was out there. They
What
had
do you mean?
no
That what was
idea
out there? What was out there?
that there was another guy besides Bob Kane that
Well,
helping.
again, that's a whole comic book history, and specifically the whole Batman, Bill Finger, Bob Kane story is just like the Stanley Jack Kirby story. Those are the two major scandals
Yes.
in comic book history that are the equivalent of the greatest intellectual theft ever. But yeah, I contributed to that Bob Kane, the Bill Finger documentary. And all I can tell you is at one point in the documentary, I say that for Bob Kane to allow his close friend and collaborator on Batman, co-creator, to let him die penniless, unknown, unmourned in New York City in an apartment alone, and never have said anything positive about him while he was alive. I said, for Bob Kane, there is no forgiveness. That's unforgivable.
Yeah.
So when that documentary premiered, I think in 2017, it premiered in New York at the New York Comic Convention that fall. And I couldn't go for some reason. It had to be a work related thing, a deadline. I couldn't go because I'm an hour out of the city in Connecticut. People told me when the screening was over, a friend of mine who was there called me up and said, Arlen, you would have loved it. At the moment in the documentary where you said the words, and for Bob Kane, there is no forgiveness, the audience cheered and clapped. So think
So,
about that.
yeah, and I agree. So, I had not planned on asking you this, but I'm like, you go on a tangent. Isn't it amazing that while it is Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, he seems very open 1 + 1 = 3, that he acknowledges how much of his success and his magic of music comes from that combination. So if you have any thoughts on that, share it.
Of course, if you know your Bruce history, from the get-go, the album was by Bruce Springsteen. The songs are by Bruce Springsteen. Bruce always had, and this is what got him through the lawsuit and those years that led to Darkness in Edge Town. And if you read his history, if you read the book Deliver Me from Nowhere, which they've just made into a movie, the one of the greatest aspects of Bruce is that he was always sure of himself. He was sure almost of his mission. There's a very little reported story that when he had to give a deposition in the Mike Appel case in New York City, he got up on the table. Remember, this is in front of lawyers and everything. And in a sense, stamped his feet at what control of his career meant to him. And that is a thread he's been consistent, like he's been consistent with so many of his greatest character traits. His compassion, his resilience, all the things we admire and love about him. That's one of the great things about him, is that he knew who he was. He knew where he came from. These all sound like cliches, but in Bruce's case, they're true.
Yeah, down south.
But does that answer your?
Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And down south, right, one of the worst insults you can give someone is they forgot where they came from. And you can never say that about Bruce, right?
Well, in a sense, that's the foundation of his career. The fact that he would choose the Greetings from Asbury Park postcard. I'm an artist. I went to Rhode Island School of Design. As a piece of graphic design, that first album cover, the idea that nobody knew anything about New Jersey or Asbury Park, the idea that rock and roll, the whole idea, and what's the word I'm looking for? Just the chutzpah it took to select that. Bruce is a creative artist, even visually, of course. For him to pick that postcard and use it on his first album to tell people, hey, I'm not New York, I'm New Jersey. That is the definition of knowing where you come from. Bruce, in so many ways, I've said this in my essays, he's the rock and roll promise delivered. He didn't squander his career like Elvis did. He didn't burn out. He didn't ever really fuck up, if I can use that word, pardon
yes, you may.
And that aspect about him, they just made a movie about just those couple years of the Nebraska era. But Bruce's whole life story is the story of rock and roll itself. The way rock and roll came into his life and saved his life, and through Elvis, through the Beatles, whatever, all those songs that he loved, what made him want to be the greatest rock and roller of all time is the perfect story. His story of how he, first of all, think about it. First, he had to be the new Dylan.
Yes.
Then after he proved he was the new Dylan, then his own manager said he had to be the future of rock and roll. And Bruce ended up living up to that. He became, I've said this before, Jesse, maybe Joe Namath predicting the Jets would win the Super Bowl in 1968 over the 17-point favorite Baltimore Colts, which was unheard of at the time. For him to declare that, I think the only other greatest 20th century proclamation that came true was John Landau in 1974 saying, I've seen the future of rock and roll, and it is Bruce Springsteen. It's a story you can't make up, and yet it all came true. Now, in a perfect self-help kind of thing, Landau worked to make that vision come true. But the point is, to make such a proclamation after he was already had to be the new Dylan.
Yeah.
And then how does he respond to being the future of rock and roll? He writes Born to Run.
Yes. All right. I,
Creates Born to Run the album. And then he has to top that
yes.
because it took 3 whole years. Now artists, they take 10 years between albums and nobody cares. Back in the mid 70s, if you didn't make an album once a year, it was whatever happened to Bruce Springsteen. And there were
Yes.
articles like that. I remember reading them. So he had to follow the greatest single of all time, in my opinion, Born to Run, and the greatest album of all time, the greatest rock and roll album of all time. You can say the Beatles, whether it's Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, that might be the greatest rock album of all time. Born to Run is the greatest rock and roll album of all time. There's no competition. And yet he had to follow that up,
Yeah.
go through a lawsuit. And what does he come back with? Darkness on the Edge of Town, which in modern Bruce polls that I've followed, Jesse, often outranks Born to Run.
Yes, they do.
And people forget Darkness had mixed reviews.
Yeah.
I still remember the Village Voice headline, Born to Rerun. And now it's considered more of a classic in many polls. I never thought Born to Run would be beaten out, but
Yeah.
I love Darkness. And of course,
Yeah.
the tour and the shows that I saw, especially September 19th, which the anniversary just passed, those might be the greatest of all time.
Yeah. So I'm going to get you to tell your Born to Run story, but if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to repeat what you've said in written terms of if whatever criteria you want to make, songwriting, showmanship,
Right.
guitar playing, vocaling, leading a band, whatever criteria you want,
All of the above.
if you check them off,
Yeah.
he hits them all. So I know you have written about that. Do you mind talking about that for a little bit?
I think you might be alluding to one of my sort of ideas about Bruce was I always said there are 4 pillars of rock and roll. It starts with Elvis, the first white boy that rocked. Then chronologically, you go to Bob Dylan for introducing lyrics and poetry versus Moon June love songs. The third pillar would be the Beatles for Enough Said.
Yeah.
Fourth pillar is Jimi Hendrix, the ultimate electric guitarist. There is still no peer to what Jimi Hendrix did. Those 4 pillars are the pillars of rock and roll. Now, where does Bruce fit in? He's not one of those pillars. He's the roof built over those pillars.
Yes.
He has the singular magnetism of an Elvis Presley. He's got the lyrics of Dylan, the new Dylan. He became the new Dylan and went beyond Dylan in many ways. Although that takes nothing away from Bob Dylan.
No, absolutely not.
But to me, our generation, Bob Dylan, we were too young to really appreciate Bob Dylan during those classic mid 60s, bringing it all back home, Highway 61 and Blonde on Blonde. I remember hearing Like a Rolling Stone on the radio, and the next thing was Layla like 3 years later.
Yeah.
That's it. I was too young to have albums and all that. Our Bob Dylan was Bruce. We came of age with Bruce. And when I look at Dylan's lyrics, and yes, they're genius, et cetera, everything great has been said about them. I always found them a little obscure, a little bit too tangential, a little bit too all over the place. And I think I speak for all of us. Yeah, Bruce's first album was very Dylanish in that sense. But even the first album, what I loved about Bruce was I felt his lyrics were more direct than Dylan, which I felt was, like I said, a little too.
I don't want to say abstract, but in a
But they were
greater
abstract.
concept,
Listen,
yeah.
I don't like abstract art.
Yeah.
I'm an artist who draws the realistic figure. I represent the backlash to abstract expressionism in the fine art world. Bruce, yeah, Bob Dylan, his lyrics are abstract. And by the way, that's part of his genius, is that
Yeah.
are abstract. And like I said, nothing I'm saying about Dylan should take anything away from Dylan.
No.
What I'm saying is I found Bruce Springsteen, in contrast, his lyrics, even on the first album, were much more direct and much more visceral. Now, people would describe visceral and direct from Dylan too. So, bottom line is Bruce was our Dylan, and he was dubbed the new Dylan when people like John Hammond thought he was going to be an acoustic act,
Yeah.
but also for the lyrics. I think there's that film video of Clive Davis when he was in love with Bruce from the beginning, sending out the first record and saying things like, blah, 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 just Dylan, you're going to love these lyrics. And yeah, he was quoting them like people quoted Dylan. But yeah, I think that's one of the things. So Bruce has the lyrics of Dylan in his own meter, in his own way. I love it at one interview that's on film from early on. I think it's from the Crawdaddy interview, one of the early interviews, 73. The interviewer brought up, so you're being called the new Dylan. And he goes, hey, man, I love Dylan, blah, 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 big influence. And he used his hand as if to say, I love Dylan. I just want to do it this way or my way.
Yes.
And he made a sweep of his hand. Enough said. That's
Yeah.
really the whole Dylan thing. So then you have the band. When I said the Beatles represented the rock and roll band, the four of them, that's where your E Street Band comes in. Bruce was not an acoustic act. He was always. I'll relate the story about when David Bowie first saw him in Max's Kansas City when he went to see Bob Marley and the Wailers or something, spring of 73. He didn't even know who Bruce Springsteen was. And as Bowie described it later in an interview, first the scruffy Dylan-looking guy comes on with an acoustic guitar, and he does a song or two, and I thought, another Dylan wannabe. But then he brings out his band. And the David Bowie said, now think about David Bowie and how much in 1973, he was aware of rock and roll history.
Yeah.
He said when Bruce brought out the band and played, it was the greatest rock and roll band he had ever seen.
Wow.
Bowie said that. The very next morning, he went out, bought Greetings from Asbury Park, and then went into the studio later on that year and recorded two of the songs. Hard to Be Saint the City and Growing Up, I think, that were later released on that box set, Sound and Vision. But the point is, what was my point? The four pillars.
The four pillars.
Right.
So you're on the band.
When I think of the Beatles, that upbeat, positive energy when they burst in 64 with all those great songs, that's part of what we Bruce fans get of seeing Bruce live. It started early on when people were raving about the E Street Band, like David Bowie, to everybody who first sees them for the first time, all the stories. But that incredible positive energy, people forget early 70s, post 60s hangover. It was de rigueur for performers to not be, quote, performing. It was all about the music, man. And they would sometimes have their back to the audience while they're slumped over their guitar. When people describe the effect of seeing Bruce Springsteen for the first time, they might not always articulate this, Jesse, but what they're trying to describe, in my opinion, is Bruce did the exact opposite of what I just described. He not only faced the audience and performed, but before Bruce, there was always a barrier in live performance between the audience and the performer. The performer never crossed that barrier, and of course, the audience can't cross that barrier. What Bruce did, not only by physically coming out into the audience, which he did in the early years, but he shattered that wall. He shattered that barrier into 1,000 pieces. And people weren't used to that in the early 70s when the style was to not even face the audience.
Yeah.
And that shattering of that fourth wall, where Bruce came out directly with his music, with his voice, with his words. And then the power of the E Street Band. In '09, I went to Bonnaroo for the first time because Bruce was headlining that year. That was the year of Radio Nowhere and whatever. And the second bill was Wilco, great band, right?
Yeah.
I had never been to Bonnaroo or any kind of festival like that. So I drove 16 hours, whatever. I went to Cleveland first because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was having a Bruce exhibit that year. So 8 hours to Cleveland, then 8 hours south to Bonnaroo in Tennessee. And I'll never forget, I'm standing in the pit with a bunch of young guys in their 20s who had never seen Bruce before, and they were Wilco fans or whatever. And I just said, you guys have no idea what you're about to be hit with. You just have no idea. No
Yeah.
offense to Wilco. They're a great band. But I'm saying, if you guys have never seen Bruce Springsteen the Street Band, and keep in mind, this is a festival, so it's not a giant arena. It's an outdoor whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm in the pit, like standing there with all. So imagine Bruce and the band come out. And I think they opened up with Radio Nowhere. But by the second song, first of all, I'm in the middle with my hands crossed, watching as these 20 somethings, their heads are being blown off. And by the second song, they're high fiving each other. They can't believe how great it is. And I'm just there with my arms crossed, like I told you.
Yeah.
And that's that energy. I can only imagine that's what the Beatles represented as the first band, the rock and roll band, to really do that. And then the last one, Jimi Hendrix, yeah, Bruce doesn't get the respect as the great guitar player that he is. And yet, he was known as a demon guitar player in the Shore area in the early 70s, number one. He chose not to be the great guitarist by giving it off to Steve Van Zandt so he could be more of a performer. But I will submit as exhibit A, B, C, and D 4 songs from the Capitol Theater September 19th show that exists on video. You can go to YouTube and find them. Prove It All Night, Because the Night, Streets of Fire, and I'm probably missing another one I can't even remember. Those to me are Bruce channeling Jimi Hendrix that night. And Bruce could have been the great guitar hero, could have been the great guitar player. Do you know there were 2 recent polls in Guitar World and Guitar Magazine, best 100 guitarists of all time? Jesse, guess where Bruce placed in both polls?
I am going to guess he isn't on the list.
On either poll. Didn't even make it in the top. But again, I submit those handful of songs from September 19, 1978, and you tell me Bruce is not a great guitarist. So gets to finish.
Yeah, please.
So Bruce has elements of the 4 pillars, but he's the combination of all 4, hence the roof.
Yeah.
There was nobody like Bruce before him, and there'll be nobody like him after when he's finally done. We are blessed to have lived and seen him. There is a Christological aspect to Bruce. When Mike Appel first heard him in his office in May of 71, I think, if you know from his interviews, I think first he cursed God because he said, God, I was making this comfortable living, writing commercial jingles and songs for the Partridge Family, and you bring me the Christ of rock and roll. Now, what does that mean, the Christ of rock and roll?
Yeah.
God bless Mike Appel. He saw in Bruce from the get-go that he would be the savior of rock and roll. When I said Bruce is the rock and roll promise delivered, if you look at the life he's led and the way rock and roll came into his life and how he's developed and the mountains he's conquered and yet stayed true to himself, and in the middle of that wrote a masterpiece called Nebraska, but meanwhile still selling out stadiums at the tail end of his career. If you look at that arc, that's the rock and roll story itself. He ended up with the rock and roll girl. And look at that marriage. Where do you find that in rock and roll history?
Yeah.
And yet he had to go through the marrying the model when I'm at the height of my fame stage, which is an interesting little sideline to Bruce's story. But yes, his life story, if they ever do make a movie of his life, maybe after Nebraska, somebody will come up and say, hey, if a Nebraska movie did well, why not his whole story? His whole story is the greatest rock and roll story ever told. There is no analog to him in music history.
And so I think that's a perfect segue. So
By the way, is the four pillars thing what you were thinking of when you asked the
that was
question?
exactly what I was thinking of. Yes. So thank
Good.
you. Thank you for doing that. That's
Glad
exactly
to
what I
help
wanted
out.
you to talk about. Yeah. During this, different people and different scholars submitted papers to present at this academic conference. And Arlen had done this similar at a different symposium. And so I was able to, we had conflicts. I wasn't able to get to see him. He wasn't able to get to see
Well, we were
mine.
scheduled at the same
Mm,
exact time. Do you
I
believe it?
know.
What are
Yeah,
the
I know.
odds of that? Jesse,
Exactly.
what are the odds of that?
I know. So I'm going to let you tell it the way you told it, and then I may raise my hand and because I want to bring in because I do think you're tough on a couple of my AM bands that I listen to on
The
your
ones I
story.
mentioned. What are they? Let me know now.
When you mention the names, I'll think of them. Yeah, just I
What?
didn't.
What? Now,
I
tell me, what AM
uh
bands? Come on.
oh damn it. Now of course you're asking me and I'm getting there. I know you did love some Elton John. You did talk about that.
Wait, but I loved. I told you I was the biggest
I
Elton
know.
John fan before
Yeah, you
Bruce.
were. Yeah, I'll think of them in a minute. So go ahead.
You know
Tell me,
what?
my friend.
If I tell the story, then interrupt me if I come to it. But yeah, I
Okay.
mentioned bands like Pilot, It's Magic, and Seasons in the Sun, and
Now, Season the Sun was a crappy song. Oh,
but you know,
but that was it.
remember the song "Honey" by Bobby Goldsboro?
Yes. Now
You
I will
know, we
tell
all
you
listen. We all have our guilty pleasures. We all have our soft spots. That
that.
become a number one smash hit
So
because people love sentimental,
yes,
sappy
yes.
songs. They love.
Good
They love it.
cry, right?
Oh, I'm about to die. Oh, this goes back to early 60s songs about tell Laura
Yeah.
I love her.
So,
People love sappy, sentimental
uh,
shit.
so two songs that you mentioned. One of them I know you mentioned. The other one you might have, but they had amazing hooks.
I didn't say they didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of being a shitty AM radio signal is having a fucking earworm hook.
Yeah, Brandy, you're a fine
No,
girl.
but that's a
What a
great
good.
song.
Yeah,
But that's a great song. But how about
the
love?
night.
How about Love Will Keep Us Together, which was the number one smash hit when Born to Run was released. And
Okay,
that was a Love Will Keep Us Together. Whatever. I still remember those hooks. I was a teenager
yeah.
listening to AM radio.
So
I
Night Chicago
know
Died
I
was the
have
one you talked
memorized
about. Yeah,
more bad songs in my brain thanks to horrible AM radio of the late 60s and early 70s than I have good songs in my brain.
there are one of Night that Chicago Died was one that I
Horrible.
loved. I love that song.
But you see, that means you've got a sappy, sentimental side.
See, Gil,
My older brother Steve, a year and a half older, we are like direct opposites when it comes to
Mhm.
music. He's more like you. He loves sentimental, sappy shit.
Yeah,
So do a billion other people.
yeah,
People love sentimental, sappy shit. Now, I'm
yes,
using shit. Yeah, I'm condemning it because I don't think it's art. I think it's commercial crap, but people love commercial crap.
yeah.
People are commercial crap in a sense. So, yeah, that
All right.
explains why bad songs sell millions of copies. Do you know in 1969, at the height of the Vietnam War, protests, 1969, do you know what the number one selling single of that year was?
No, I could probably think of it, but just go ahead, tell me.
Sugar, Sugar by the Archies. Now, just think about that
The
dichotomy.
ultimate bubblegum
Ultimate bubblegum
bubblegum
hit
song.
in
Yes.
the year 1969,
With not a
the year
real
of
band.
Woodstock. Jimi
Yes.
Hendrix. And yet the number one single was Sugar Bum 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 Bum. And everybody loved it and bought it. Enough said?
Enough said. All right. So I'm gonna set the thing. Arlen was discussing, he's making this, and he starts off with a young Arlen and his AM radio. Take
Okay.
it away,
So
my friend.
for years, I've been working on an extended essay on my first hearing of the song Born to Run when I was 17 in New Jersey, driving my mother's 74 Plymouth Duster. It had the AM radio on, and grew up on AM radio. I grew up on the Beatles. I grew up on the 60s as a kid. And AM radio back then was great. It had Motown, it had everything, all different kinds, stacks, everything. And then by the 70s, it became pablum, and FM radio was in the rise. But I was still listening to AM radio. I think the radio only had AM. I don't even think we had FM. So I'm listening to whatever, WABC. That's what I grew up with, Cousin Brucey and all that.
Yeah.
So I grew up on the Four Seasons. The first song I can remember hearing is Big Girls Don't Cry on a transistor radio. I was like 6 years old in summer camp. You mentioned summer camp. And I thought the lyrics were big girls, small fry. So when you're a boy, the girls are taller. Makes sense.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So I'm driving on Route 4 in New Jersey, classic highway, 17. I just got my license in June. And on the radio comes a song that just immediately stunned me. And by the time the song was over, I literally had to pull over to the side of the road. I turned off the highway and I pulled off in the suburban side road just to collect my thoughts. The song sounded like a little bit of everything I loved about music. The opening drum sounded like Little Eva's Locomotion. And then it brought a guitar theme that sounded like one of the greatest guitar themes ever, on a par with Layla and Satisfaction and any of the great guitar themes. And then a sax solo. I played the saxophone in sixth grade. I gave it up when I got into junior high school like an idiot. I could have been a David Brecker or whatever his name was had I kept it up. But it was a sax solo like I'd never heard before. And then that bridge, I had never heard anything like that. And the music itself reminded me of the NFL films of the 1960s, which introduced the whole slow motion, the balls,
Gridiron
and it had
Sunday.
great music.
Titans, yes.
That was semi-military, but it was also a little bit rock and roll. Classic songs that have been used in so many places, you're not even aware of it. But I grew up loving those songs. My older brother and I, big football fans. Part of this song on the radio sounded a little like the NFL theme music. But most incredibly of all of that was the vocalist. I had never heard a singer sing with that kind of commitment, that conviction, that emotion. And then, of course, there were the yells at the end that kind of reminded me of the Frankie Valli wails at the end of all those Four Seasons songs I loved. I was a big Elton John fan at the time. 1975, Captain Fantastic had just come out, shipped platinum. The New York DJs did not play the first two albums because they were pissed off at Mike Appel and his overexuberance in promoting Bruce. And I'll never forgive the New York DJs for that, because anybody from the New York area that tells you they heard the first two albums is full of shit. Because I'm telling you, I would have heard them because I was listening to FM rock radio by that time. I became an Elton John fan when Crocodile Rock came out. That's exactly when Greetings came out. But instead of hearing Greetings, I'm hearing Crocodile Rock. And I go out and I buy all of Elton John's albums and I become an Elton John fan. I'm listening to Caribou when I could have been listening to Wildly Innocent. So, for anybody in the New York area, it's usually the song Born to Run that got them to hear Bruce for the first time. Similar to the English audience, I think. Them only heard Bruce with Born to Run, not the first two albums. So I had to pull over to the side of the road and collect my thoughts. I couldn't, yeah. So while Elton John was a great vocalist, I knew the lyrics were not his, that he was singing somebody else's lyrics. And part of what I loved about rock and roll was usually it was about people singing their own lyrics, at least post Dylan.
Yeah.
So I love plenty of rock and roll songs that are not written by the people that perform them. But while Elton John was a great vocalist, when I heard the vocals on Born to Run, like I went from being an Elton John fan immediately to being, who is this guy? I've got to know everything about him.
Yeah.
So that was when I was 17 in 1975. Years later, I started writing an essay that became the longest essay I've written about any of Bruce's songs. And if you know about John Landau and the essay that he wrote in 1974 when he saw Bruce and went home and wrote the famous review that had the phrase, "I've seen the future of rock and roll." If you haven't actually read the article, 9/10 of the article is not about Bruce. It's about Landau recalling his history in rock and roll. From his earliest childhood, he produced a band from Michigan, the MC5, when he was like 21. And all his experiences, he became the head records review editor of Rolling Stone. And this is going on for pages and pages. It was like a long article. But then he got burned out in the early 70s, like we all did, the hangover from the 60s, and then the mellow music of the singer-songwriters. And it's like, whatever, what happened to rock and roll? And when Bruce hit him, like he would hit all of us, that's what made him say it. The actual quote is, "I saw my rock and roll past flash before my eyes, but I also saw something else. I saw a rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen." His essay was about that phrase, his rock and roll past, everything that led him up to that night in May when he saw Bruce at Charlie's Place, whatever it was called. I tried to write my version of that essay that included all those things I just rattled off. Little Eva's locomotion, the guitar twang, like the James Bond guitar theme, the NFL music, the saxophone, the Four Seasons, Frankie Valli Wail. Everything was in, and the song itself, the lyrics, everything made it to me the theme song of rock and roll itself. So when the 50th anniversary of Born to Run came up, I'm living in Westport, Connecticut, and I pitched the Westport Library. They have a music symposium every April, a long weekend with events. I said, how about in April of 2025, we do a Born to Run at 50 panel? I'm sure the Monmouth people are going to be doing something in the actual fall when the album came out, so we could be earlier. And they said yes. And Dick Wingate, my good friend who was CBS promotions manager during Darkness, he's on the board of directors. And so much of the music symposium is his concept and his work. And so we got Kenneth Womack to be a guest, the academic from the Monmouth, teaches at teaches at Monmouth.
Yeah, exactly.
But he's written books on Bruce, most recently an A to Z type book. But I knew him because he wrote the introduction to my book that I'm trying to sell about Bruce Springsteen and his unreleased material. And then we got Michael Pilot, who was a CBS album promotion guy during Bruce's early years. He's the guy that set up the Houston gigs, Michael Pilot. And he was
nice.
The September Symposium 2 weeks ago, Michael Pilot, when they had all the professionals in the music industry, he was there. Those were our four, and Mike Appel, of course, because Dick Wingate knew Mike Appel. Without Mike Appel, there is no panel.
Yeah.
To introduce the panel, I decided I'm going to take my essay, which takes about 15 minutes to read, and I'm going to attach images to it like I do in all my lectures and my webinars. I call them their verbal, visual. Lecture is such a pejorative. I call what I do visual lectures because there's an image for every sentence I speak. So I put that together as a way of introducing Born to Run at 50. And it went really well. I got some great compliments in April. I was hoping to do it for the Saturday symposium, except with the actual men who played on the song Born to Run. But Bob Santelli ended up going with other people. But at least on the academic Sunday, I got 15 minutes to do my same presentation. And of course, you said you got to see it on the video. How'd I do?
I think you did great. It was beautiful. A couple of things. One, Kenneth has been on the podcast a couple times,
Who?
and Kenneth Womack has been on.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's going to join me. And Friday or later this week, Dick Wingate is going to join me.
Send me an invite or something.
Yeah, I'm excited about meeting him.
He's
He sounds
great.
like a hell of a great guy.
Enough said.
Yeah, that is great. So I thought it was really, you articulated really well why this spoke to you, because that's one of the questions I'll ask. When did you first discover Bruce and what about him spoke to you? And different people have problems. I have problems saying at times, like when I heard Endless Summer and Brian Wilson, the Beach Boys, what about it spoke to me? I just knew it was music I'd never heard like before in my life.
Listen, the job of intellectuals and writers and critics is to articulate the things that the quote layman
Yeah.
maybe feels and agrees with, but doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily articulate. And that's okay. And listen, you articulate it the best way you can.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, there are some of us that try to put, and that's what I try to do in my essay. I
Yeah.
try to write clearly, but I use examples, I compare it to things. So I try to describe, and then I broke down Born to Run. Why is it so great? I talk about how, if you look at the history of rock and roll, what are considered the greatest singles of all time, starting with any Elvis song and going into all the great, The Who, My Generation, Rolling Stones, Satisfaction, Layla. When you think of whatever are considered, what do you call it, Stairway to Heaven, all the great signature songs, Maggie May by Rod
Yeah.
Stewart, any number of Beatles songs, of course, but just pick one, Hey Jude. If you think of all the greatest songs, other than the Motown songs, which have black people actually playing the music, good luck finding a single black musician
Mhm.
in any of those greatest hits I just rattled off.
Yeah.
Good luck. And yet, the song Born to Run is made up of a perfectly integrated six-piece band. You've got Bruce, Danny Federici, and Gary Talent, white men. And then you have Clarence Clemens, David Sanchez, and Ernest Boom Carter. By the way, before I forget, speaking of Ernest Boom Carter, he was only in the band 6 months and he only recorded one song, the song Born to Run. At the Saturday symposium, when it was over at 6 o'clock, they wouldn't let people get to the lip of the stage, but all the band members and people were all up on stage. So I went as far as I could go down the aisle before a female security guard was standing in front of me. And I saw Ernest Carter close to me. So I yelled out his name and he turned to me. And I said, Mr. Carter, I just want to let you know that, in my opinion, and I think many others share this, your drumming on the song Born to Run is the single greatest piece of recorded drumming in rock and roll history. And he smiled, he said, thank you. And I said, listen, I love Max Weinberg, but even he can't duplicate Your drumming on that song, that little jazz shuffle you do, I think it's in the middle of Clarence's solo, or maybe
Yeah.
that little shuffle he does. Even Max has said, I tried to duplicate it. I
I
never
can't do
could.
it.
So, in my opinion, yeah, Bonzo Bonham, a great drummer, pick any Led Zepp song. But to me, the drumming by Ernest Carter on the from the opening fill to the final fill and everything in between, it's a little jazzy, it's classic Hal Blaine rock and roll drumming, but there's a finesse to it. And again, just for that little shuffle alone, that's pure Ernest Carter. And I said, and I just want to let you know, Mr. Carter, I'm blessed that I'm able, after 50 years, to finally tell you this to your
Nice.
face. So that for me was one of the highlights of the weekend symposium. But yeah, the fact that it's an equally integrated black, which was the promise of rock and roll and Elvis Presley in the first place, white men doing black music, but it didn't mean excluding black musicians. And yet, like I said, all of those greatest hits, other than the Motowns, good luck finding a black musician.
Yeah.
That's one aspect. I compared the lyrics to Walt Whitman's Song of the Open Road. The lyrics, when I listen to Born to Run, like we know the backstory, how Bruce worked on that song and changed the lyrics a million times. Yeah, why? Because the final lyrics, they're the greatest lyrics of any song ever written. Every line is just a classic. Will you walk with me out on the wire? Because, baby, I'm just a scared and lonely rider. I got to know how it feels. I want to know if love is why. So I compare the lyrics to like the greatest poetry in America ever written. And then, like I said, the vocals, the emotion, the commitment, the conviction. There's a isolated vocal you can find on YouTube that somebody made of the recorded Born to Run vocals. Those vocals by Bruce of the song Born to Run, I know I sound like a broken record, but like they're the greatest rock and roll vocals ever sung.
Yeah.
And when he does those, whoa, he's on the edge of his emotions in that song. And that's what I think attracts us all to Bruce, whether we can articulate it or not, Jesse. It's that realness, that raw emotion, that commitment, that believability, because he believes it and therefore we believe it. We couldn't find that anywhere else. Again, Elvis, Dylan, the Beatles, they had glimpses of it. We had portions of it. We had tastes of it. But only Bruce put it all together.
Yeah.
And that, I compare him to the superhero Captain Marvel. When he says Shazam, the letters that make up Shazam are the wisdom of Solomon, the strength of Hercules, the something of Achilles. You know, that's Bruce. I call him the superhero of rock and roll. The four pillars, those four elements, nobody else had ever combined them. Yeah, when Dylan went electric for those 1 or 2 years, people talk about that. Okay, yeah, that was 1 or 2 years. Bruce has been doing it for 50 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, people talk about the greatest Dylan ever were those couple years with the band when he went electric before the motorcycle accident. Yeah, that was 2 whole years. Bruce has been
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah, so all I'm saying is no, again, not to take anything away from Dylan, but to me, Bruce is, they call Elvis the king. I've never called Bruce the boss. Bruce never liked the boss. It comes from the 60s when the boss was considered like the establishment. And they started calling him the boss as the way of ribbing him, that he was
Yeah.
the boss of the band. But it was a playful dig. And Bruce never, he went on record early on as saying, I don't like it. I've never once referred to him as the boss because he is the king.
Yeah.
No, again, Elvis,
He
fine.
would, yeah, he would disagree with you, but I understand what you're
Well, he
saying.
and his legion of fans would disagree with me. But I'm telling you,
No, Bruce would disagree with you.
as
Yeah.
objectively as you can be, all art is essentially subjective.
Yes.
But as objective as you can be, like I said, Bruce went beyond Elvis. He went beyond Dylan. He went beyond the Beatles. And he went beyond, I don't say beyond Jimi Hendrix, but he still is the man with the guitar. Even now, when he stops and plays guitar, it's still mesmerizing because he is one of the greatest guitarists, regardless of what Guitar World and Guitar Magazine said.
Yeah. Yes. Arlen, this has been so much fun.
I can't believe it's our hour up.
Yeah, it is, but that's okay.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, we're going to have you back on again. I will not, we will
Let it
not
not
go.
be another 10 years or
It will
whatever.
not be, I promise that. So one
Like
of
we
the
just got started.
I know one of the things that you are great at is you do live presentations that are also available online. So what do you got coming on? Because one of the beautiful things about my friend is I Renaissance man is a little tough, but there is a lot to be
I
said
will
there.
accept that appellation.
Yeah, Twilight Zone, comics and art, pop culture, Springsteen. Just
Those are my three children in a way.
yes, they are. Yes.
And I've done books and projects about all of them. So coming up, I work with this company, New York Adventure Club.
Yes.
The website is nyadventureclub.com. I've done webinars with them on Bruce's music before, a Bruce live retrospective where I culled all of the earliest, best videos of his greatest performances. And I've done a webinar with them on September 19th, 78, and why it's the single greatest show, which I've also done as a live lecture in New York City, and that's on my YouTube channel. So my YouTube channel and my Vimeo channel, which are linked from my website, have videos of the Bruce things I've done. But coming up brand new with New York Adventure Club, starting October 14th, which is a Tuesday, and continuing for 4 consecutive Tuesdays, a retrospective of Bruce's career that kind of will dovetail with the release of the Nebraska album and the new film in late October. So week 1, October 14th, is the first 3 albums leading up to Born to Run. Episode 2 is about Darkness in the River. Episode 3 is about Nebraska and Born in the USA. And episode 4 is basically the rest of the 20th and into the 21st century. It'll be me covering the prime of Bruce's career in a kind of hour and a half or so webinar format where I show video clips and still images into a cohesive timeline. I describe what I do as like making a Ken Burns documentary, but in real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, if people go, I'll be posting information about the Bruce thing in about a week. I have an events blog page on my website, or people can go to nyadventureclub.com right now, and all 4 Bruce things I think are up on their calendar. And it's a cheap ticket. I think it's $15, and maybe there's a group rate of seeing all of them. I sent you JPEGs of the 4 graphics. Did you
Yes.
open up those and see those?
I did pull them up, and I had back the 4 or 5 years ago when we first met, you had shared some links to your, and
Right.
I think let's get together in a month and let's talk about
I'm
either
gonna copy you into the
okay.
first night.
Yeah, so like the late October, early November, let's talk about the book you're trying to publish. So
Well,
I'm going to tease that because
we can talk about that anytime. So you can schedule
okay.
that time.
Okay. Yeah, I really want to talk about that. I think that
Just to give
is
people
something.
a little preview, if you can
Yeah.
see. It's called
Yes.
Brilliant Disguise, Bruce Springsteen's greatest hits you've never heard. It's essentially liner notes to all of his greatest unreleased material, which, if other than the recent batch written by Eric Flanagan, none of the box sets had liner notes by Bruce.
Right.
Track, Darkness, The River. So I write about his greatest outtakes, and I've been writing these essays for 25 years. And since then, he has released some of them. but nobody's ever written about Bruce's career like I have through his unreleased material, which, by the way, includes all of his unreleased live greatest hits, especially before 1980 in the 70s, that are so much a part of his career, and he's never put out any of that.
Yeah.
Some of those shows are now available through Nugs. Again, nobody's written about them the way I have. So my book is like an alternate history of Bruce that runs parallel with his
Yeah.
career, but in many ways is different and, dare I say, better,
Yeah.
if that's even possible.
So before I get you out of
Yeah.
here, thoughts on the box set tracks 2 and the 7 unreleased albums. Now I know
Well,
you're an early Bruce guy.
yes.
You
I
acknowledge his
guarantee
greatness.
you, without listening to, I haven't bought it because I don't got $300 to spare right now. But the first album, the earliest one, the 83 Garage Sessions in LA,
Yeah.
I guarantee you that's the best of the outtakes of that whole collection, because part of what I write about in my book are the Born in the USA outtakes, of which those LA Garage Sessions are. Now, Eric Flanagan wrote liner notes that I haven't read yet, but I guarantee you my liner notes to those songs, I'll still say is the best. But I'm more excited actually about this Nebraska box set coming out.
Are you?
Where, although I'm a little disappointed, I thought all of the Nebraska songs had electric versions, but I believe he's only putting out 6 of the electric Nebraska. And some of my favorite songs are therefore not electrified. State Trooper and My Father's House are not electrified.
Mm,
Those are my 2 favorite songs on that album.
yeah.
But I'm interested in the film, and I'm interested in what those 6 electric songs sound like. So that's coming out in a few weeks. I think I pre-ordered that. But I don't know. Do you have the 9 album set? Have you listened to all of it?
I have listened to all of them.
Give me-
Yeah, I really love the soundtrack to Faithless, the album where the movie he didn't make that
Right.
didn't get made, just because it's something totally different from him.
First of all, since I've never heard it all, but I've claimed that I'll bet the 83 songs are the best disc on the set. Do you not agree with that?
They're all different. It's hard for
Yeah.
me to pick one
Okay, but
different. Yeah.
basically, is there a lot of good material in those other albums?
Yeah, and the album that he did, which is a Sinatra album, a
Yeah.
Twilight album, that's interesting.
I,
It's very,
I like Bruce. I'm not a big fan of his acoustic stuff.
yeah,
I like a lot of Nebraska, but Tom Joad makes Nebraska look like Born to Run. And then
yeah.
Devils and Dust, I think I listened to once and never have I put it back on the turntable. But I'm more interested in Bruce, the pop musician, the Bruce of writing, that's why I love the River outtakes. That's Bruce, the rock and roll singles artist. All those great songs, Restless Nights, Take Them As They Come. Are you kidding me?
And like Little Steven said, that if Bruce had wanted to be,
Of
he could have been
course.
the #1
Well,
pop writers.
look,
Like,
Fire and Because the Night are just the tip of the iceberg.
yeah,
People don't maybe know that Fire was a demo for Elvis to be his comeback single, and it was on its way to Graceland when he died.
yeah,
And Bruce took it back and gave it to Robert Gordon. But I think had Fire reached Elvis before he died, I think it would have saved his life. It would have literally saved his life. Can you imagine Elvis hearing Fire? And by the way, the demo version with the E Street Band that he did finally put out, although he did overdubs and all that, what I call the original outtake is the greatest version of Fire ever done.
yeah.
Better than any live version. And to me, that version of Fire with the E Street Band is the greatest version, but not the version he put out on tracks, because he did the vocal different, he overdubbed, he screwed it up. You got to find what I call the original outtakes.
All right, I'll look for that.
But anyway, there's enough good material to make it worth $300.
It is to me because I'm a completist
Yeah, but I'm
and
asking
art.
to be a completist. Is
Yeah.
there enough good material other than the 83 album, which I already know those songs, I don't know the
Yeah.
other 8 albums. Is, in your opinion, as a Bruce fan,
Yeah.
do you think there's enough good material there, or is it scarce?
I, because, and I'll have to expand a little bit to give a quick sketch. Heard Bruce first in the River, then Born in the USA, and then went through Tunnel of Love, and then drifted apart and came back at the Rising.
Okay,
And
not
then
a
went,
fan.
yeah, and I went, holy shit. So the modern stuff means more to me emotionally than the earlier stuff. So yes, for me as a fan who loves the modern different, it absolutely, take my money, I love it.
Are you saying on each of those 8 albums, for you, there's like enough good to great songs on each one?
Yes, for me. Is reminds me too much of Ghost of Tom Joad, which I'm not as a big a fan of. But yeah, now I don't think it would be for you because of your what.
Listen, I'll tell you how I feel. I
Yeah,
like a handful of songs on the Rising.
yeah,
I like, I think Magic is the best album he's done since Tunnel of Love. There's a couple songs on Magic that rank with his best material. I'll Work for Your Love.
I
You
love that
Will
song.
Be Coming Down. Girls in Their Summer Dresses.
Yeah,
And Your Own Worst Enemy.
yeah,
Those 4 songs, like I said, rank with his greatest 70s material. And then everything he's done since then, I've been like, Western Stars, I like maybe one song on it.
yeah,
The one he released as a single, I forget what even the title of it. But yeah, I haven't really liked, there's some tunes on Letter to You that are okay, but they don't make me want to revisit them and listen to
yeah.
them
I get you.
the
Yeah,
way I can listen to those Magic songs, like I can listen to Bruce's greatest material.
yeah,
Oh yeah, when I looked at the lineup of the other albums, I'm like, but you see, something like him doing Frank Sinatra, I'm more interested in Bruce doing pop music than
yeah,
I am Bruce doing his acoustic.
yeah. I got you.
Yeah, I can only take a little bit of that,
I got you. All
right?
right.
But if I have $300 lying around where I don't know what to do with it,
Okay.
I'll take a chance on.
There you go.
Yeah,
All
because
right.
listen, I'm a completist. I have to have it eventually.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I bet you I'll be buying it for that one disc,
Yeah.
$300. Do you
All right.
like the 83 songs?
I do. I like them a lot.
There's some great stuff on there. Don't
There
Back
is.
Down. And if you read in my book, the Born to Run liner notes chapter,
Yeah.
it's all those songs.
Yeah.
And I think they're all fucking great.
Yeah. I mean, it is, I love the idea that he had 7 GD songs, albums not released.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean the material is worth. That's always the thing with outtakes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can have Neil Young has albums worth, so does Dylan, but that
Hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean it's great material. And
Yeah.
sometimes there's a reason why an artist and a musician leaves a song behind. Now, I think in Bruce's case, and I write about this in my book,
Mhm.
I think Bruce's biggest artistic flaw, and he's got very few, if any at all, but if I were to say, what is Bruce Springsteen's flaw? I think being too close to his own material. Even though he had Landau and Appel and all that, in the end, I think Bruce makes his decisions.
Yeah.
Starting really, when you look at the outtakes, starting with Darkness, and then the River outtakes, and then the Born in the USA outtakes, you're like, and then when you look at what he put on instead, The River is one of my least favorite albums, especially once I heard the River outtakes. Restless Nights and Take 'Em As They Come are better than any song on the River. I'm sorry. There aren't better songs on the River, and then Take 'Em and then Loose Ends, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
So Dark, we bought the official line from Dave Marsh and Landau that only with the River did Bruce Springsteen balance, the serious songs with the party songs like his live shows, right?
Yeah.
Guess what? You look at the outtakes to Darkness, he had the party songs and the serious songs. Darkness should have been the double album with Fire and Because the Night on it. Hello.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then River should have been the single album, which was the 1979 album Ties That Bind.
Yeah.
Now,
Absolutely.
listen, I like a song like Cadillac Ranch or Ramrod in their live settings as party songs with a crowd. I don't want them on the record instead of Take Them As They Come. Are you kidding me? Even Bruce, decades later, said something about some of the songs on River. Yeah, we threw that on there. Maybe I shouldn't
Yeah.
have. Do you know Steve Van Zandt calls the River outtakes a series of lost arguments? Think about that.
That
My
tells.
essays on the River outtakes are
Yeah.
me winning the arguments for Steve Van Zandt.
I
When
love
you
that.
read my chapter on the River outtakes, and I have redeemed those lost arguments. I've made the argument for their inclusion, but that's what my book is about. That here's a version of Bruce that you've literally never heard.
Yeah.
Backed by my liner notes, you're going to learn about Bruce's career in a whole different way. That again, it runs parallel, but it is significantly different in many areas. And that's why Neil Young is releasing outtakes and Bob Dylan does. He's letting his fans know there's a whole other Neil Young and a whole nother Bob Dylan that you don't know exists.
Yeah.
And Bruce has that. And he's released it in a kind of a haphazard way.
Yeah.
But my book is if they ever would hire me, that's what my book is. And the songs that I write about would be the greatest collection of Bruce songs ever.
Yeah. My friend, this is always a joy. We will do this again soon. Thank you.
I'm going to hold you to it, Jesse. It better not be another 5 or 10 years or whatever.
No, I promise it won't be.
Hey, thanks for giving me this great opportunity to wax poetic ad nauseum.
All right.
Love of Bruce.
All right. Hang tight just for a minute. Listeners, thank you for all your support and love. Be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.